Malik Monk and Nicolas Claxton, could they become Detroit Pistons next year? Should they be the main targets in free agency? Would that be a successful free agency? We'll talk about all of that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So today I want to talk about the whole Monty Williams situation. I think it's just really weird at this point. We'll hit on it a little later. And I had a lot of you guys after the last episode. We talked about the 04 Pistons versus the Golden State Warriors of 2017-18, that little era. I gave my thoughts on that, but then that had a lot of you guys ask me, Koo, if you could take one player from the 2004 team and put him on this team, who would it be? It's a question you guys have asked me a lot over the last few years, and I think we've talked about it quite a bit the last few years, but has my answer changed? We'll talk about that a little later as well. But I want to start off with the Athletic article written by James Edwards III, which also has where the Monty stuff is coming from. That has a lot of people talking today, but we'll get to that later. One of the main things, though, actually, I think probably the main thing in this piece from James is the Pistons' potential free agent targets, which, by the way, before we keep going, for those of you guys watching on YouTube, I'm getting I got a whole new setup. So if you see me looking over to the right, it's because I changed my setup and my monitors over here. I have a new desk coming in. We're changing up this whole setup. So just bear with me until we get everything completed. Trust me, when I watch the videos back and I see myself look over to the right, it gets on my nerves. So we'll have it all suited out or settled out before too long. It'll be good in a minute. But anyways, let's get back to this. So in this article, it was a mailbag and James was taking questions from fans. And in one of the questions, a fan asked him about free agency and Fontecchio and etc. And in his answer, James said, quote, "As for other realistic free agent options, I think Detroit goes heavily after the likes of Malik Monk, Nick Claxton, and Gary Harris. Monk feels like some of the Pistons will heavily prioritize due to the team's need for legitimate three-point shooting and off-the-dribble shot creation. Claxton will address the rim protection woes. Harris, despite usually missing several games this season due to injury, is the exact type of 3-and-D role player the Pistons could desperately use," end quote. So these are my thoughts about this. There's multiple angles I want to go with this. So I guess the first angle to go at is, would I be okay with the Pistons going after Malik Monk, Claxton, and Gary Harris? 100%. I think those guys very much address some of the issues the Pistons have where it comes to three-point shooting and some off-guard defense and paint defense and just rim protection. Like, I think those are some of the biggest things the Pistons struggled with and they need to improve on. So I think all those guys make sense. Now, the type of money you'd have to commit to them to get them to sign with Detroit, we'll see. We'll see how much money it is. I know the cap's going up, but still, it's not like money just doesn't matter at all. It still matters. So depending on how much money you're talking, maybe my opinion changes a little bit. But the players themselves, I think those guys should be targets. I think they all fit with what the Pistons are trying to do. The guy that I'm actually pretty interested in is Gary Harris. Not that he's better than Monk or Claxton, but he's kind of the mold that I've been telling you guys for a while that I'd like to see next to Cade, that 3-and-D bigger guy. Like, he's not 6'8" or anything, but he's bigger. He got some strength to him, and a good defender that can space the floor. That's the kind of player I want to see next to Cade. I think that's the best fit. I think the team agrees. So that's the one I'm interested in, whether it's Gary Harris or a different player. That's kind of what piques my interest the most. Not saying, again, that he's better than Monk or Claxton, but just that type of archetype is what I'm really looking forward to the Pistons eventually getting next to Cade. That's the first thing. The second takeaway I had when I read this was, I don't know how anyone doesn't immediately go to thinking about Jane Ivey and Jalen Duren. Because I think, reading in between the lines from everything James has reported and some of the things that I've heard, I don't understand how anyone couldn't come away thinking, just again, reading the articles, listening to the podcast, all of it, and reading between the lines and not come away thinking the Pistons do not believe that Jane Ivey and Jalen Duren can be trusted with a big role next year. Whether that ends up in them being traded or simply just reduced to just a backup role. My second takeaway was they really view those guys as guys that need to be replaced in the starting lineup, and guys that they cannot trust at this moment moving into the next year to be significant contributors. And again, whether it's in trade or off the bench, even if they're coming off the bench, I don't think you're seeing them being like big contributors if they go out and spend a bunch of money on Malik Monk, if they go out and spend a bunch of money on Nick Claxton. And I guess I'll go into my third takeaway now, which is more hyper-focused on one player. For me, I'm going to do two different ones. It's going to be my opinion and what I think the team, based off the things we're reading and some of the things I've heard, I'm going to go what I think and what I believe the team is thinking. What I believe is, if I had to, again, I think you're going to hear about one of those guys being traded all offseason. Like it just is what it is. That's the road that the Pistons seem to be heading down. It's just going to be talked about. So, in my opinion, as I've said on the podcast many times, if I had to pick one to move on from, I'd keep Duren as a backup, and then I'd move Ivy for a different piece. That's where I'm at. However, I'm starting to think that the team may not agree with that. I think if the team had to move off one of them, I think they move off of Duren. And the reason why I think that is, would you guys agree? I would agree with this. Again, based off the things we've read and some of the things that have been talked about behind the scenes, I feel like the biggest thing that's been talked about is one of the biggest reasons why the Pistons were not good. One of the biggest issues with this team that need to be addressed is rim protection. From everything I understand, from things I've heard, rim protection is something they very, very much prioritize. It's like probably number one on the list of things they're like, yeah, we have to get that. That's a major issue. And again, reading between the lines makes me think that they really were not like, I mean, I feel like anyone who watched last year probably wasn't happy, but they really don't. It feels like they really were off put by Duren's defense this past year. So that makes me think if they really don't believe that Duren has a future pathway to defense, to becoming a good defender, I think he may be the more expendable one out of Ivy and Duren. I'm starting to think they would rather have Ivy just come off the bench and kind of grow in that type of role. Not as a point guard, I hope not. I hope they have him as an off guard still, but kind of develop off that. And I don't know, man. I think they might want to move off of Duren, get a guy like Claxton, and just let Stu be the backup five. Because I think Stu and the team this past year were one of the main reasons why I feel like Stu really had a good season. I think both him and the team were identifying and realizing, okay, how can he be best successful? How can he help us the most? Where is he best at, et cetera, et cetera. I think they both started to figure that out, and that is as a backup five. Whether it's a starting five, backup five, whatever, it's as a five with a guy like Asar next to him and letting him be a spacing five. Let him be a guy that pulls a center away from the basket. That is why I feel like they identified both of them throughout the year. And he's not going to start next year at the five. So it takes me down the pathway of thinking, again, along with everything that keeps getting written about and what I've heard, I think they might move on from Duren. Like, if I had to put money on it, I think that if I had to bet between the two, I think it would be Duren. I think they really, really were off-put by his defense this past year. That's just my read on the situation. I think they really were off-put by his defense. And if they think Stu, like it seems to appear, I should say, that Stu is a backup five that they value, and it seems like they very much value him. They obviously gave him a contract extension, and a lot of teams throughout the league value him and like him. They try to trade for him. They want Stu to be the backup five, and their top of the priority list is going and getting a rim protecting five. I mean, where does that leave Duren? That's my question. That was my third takeaway, and maybe should have been my number one takeaway because it's what had me thinking the most from this article. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like, again, let me know. I feel like the thing that's been talked about the most from the beat writers, from any leaks, from articles, and again, from this podcast, what I've talked about and tried to share with you guys as much as I can, it seems like that center position is the number one priority for them. Like that, getting rim protection and legitimate defense at that position, it seems like that is what they prioritize the most right now. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't prioritize the three-point shooting and the 3-and-D. Like, they very much prioritize that too. Like, all of it. It's everything. They need to improve everywhere. They are aware they need to improve literally everywhere. It just seems like the thing that really bugged them the most and really put them off the most is that it was the lack of defense from their center position. I think that's just the read I'm getting on it. So, I think Nick Claxton would be great. So we'll see what happens. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukuyo. How do you guys feel about this? Do you guys think I'm on to something here? Do you guys disagree, agree? Again, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukuyo. When we come back, this whole Monty Williams situation, man, I think it's getting weird. Now, I'll tell you guys what I mean by that when we come back. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get on your way to being your best self. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. And when we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Again, look, small things, letting them build up and up and up, it starts to get really, really negative. It can really affect you to where it just eventually just explodes and you just can't hold it in anymore. And that's why therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. Again, whether it be big, small, or a bunch of small things that's building up. And if you're thinking of starting therapy and giving it a try, you definitely should check out BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And the best thing with that is that you can switch therapists just like that anytime with no additional charge. If you feel like you and that therapist aren't vibing, you guys aren't on the same page, you're not feeling it, again, you can switch just like that and with no additional charge, at any time. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So, Monty Williams. We just talked about this in the last podcast, and obviously we've talked about it quite a bit throughout the offseason, and we're going to continue to talk about it until they come to a decision on whether he's returning or they're moving off of him. It's going to be a talking point. It's probably the main talking point of the Pistons offseason currently. Like, the future of your head coach who has that much money tied to him, like that, yeah, that's going to be a talking point. I think this situation is getting really weird. So in this article from James, this mailbag, he says in this he says in this article, after being asked about Monty, he says, I'm 50-50 on Williams returning. I don't think it's a coincidence that Langdon's introductory press conference hasn't yet been announced and Williams' future is still swirling question. He also goes on to say, Williams currently has two things working in his favor. He's owed a lot of money. He did not have a good roster this past season. He also, somewhere in this article, I believe earlier in the article, said that the Pistons are evaluating the future of Monty Williams at this point. I want to get the exact quote. I skipped over it. Right here. It says, it is believed that the organization is now evaluating the coaching staff, including head coach Monty Williams, who signed a 6-year, $73 million contract this time last year. I think this whole situation is just, I think it's a little weird, and it's hard to piece together what exactly is happening, because let's go down common sense, or let's not say common sense, but maybe the logical thought process. You have this terrible season this past year. You lose the most games in franchise history. You had the worst season in franchise history. You break the single season losing streak record. It was the the hospital burnt down like it did in The Dark Knight. It got blown up, and Monty Williams and Troy Weaver were walking away like the Joker, smashing the phone, laughing, whatever. Like that. That's what happened, okay? You get a new president of basketball operations to basically fix all of this and get his guys in. Give him the clear vision, and let him fix this mess. And the first thing they do is move on from the GM and Troy Weaver. They move on from him, completely remove him from the organization. The only other person with their fingerprints on that season, mostly their fingerprints on that season, is the head coach. So I feel like the logical thought process would be a president of basketball operations would come in, clear the front office, get his guys into the front office, and then he would come in and clear the coaching staff and get his guys into the coaching staff. So it's all his vision from here on out, his guys from here on out, and he wants to build his own image, right? Okay, so that's what the logical thought process to me says. Yet we're on June 5th where I'm recording this, and there seems to be, at the very least, uncertainty on what they're going to do with Monty Williams. And during this time, the thing that makes it most confusing for me, or maybe, let me not say confusing, that's the wrong word. The most weird to me is that while this is happening, you are having head coaches get hired. You're having Kenny Atkinson get this interview with the Cavs. You're seeing Mike Budenholzer get hired. You're seeing potentially, it sounds like JJ Redick going to the Lakers. You're seeing these coaches and these coaching staff or these head coaches are then reaching out reportedly to other head coaching candidates that are getting interviews to join their staff. So the more that time passes, you're losing out on head coaching candidates to other head coaching jobs. And you also are potentially losing them to other staffs for head coaching jobs. So it feels like, on one hand, I get the view from the fan that says it seems like Monty's returning. It seems like Monty's coming back for at least another year because they wanted to move on from him. They would have moved on from him to go get their guy before they're gone. I get that thought process. However, I don't believe that's I personally do not believe that's what's happening. And this is why. We have heard them speak about. We have had a statement from the team. We have had articles until today. We have had articles from multiple places, not just the beat writers, but nationally, discussing the Pistons' decision-making with the front office and what was going to happen. And for about 2 weeks, it felt like they were everyone involved purposely was not, Monty did not get mentioned at all. Monty had not, like he had been off the radar, wasn't mentioned. He wasn't being mentioned anywhere. Like it was purposely being kept quiet. And along with that, like James mentions in this article, they have not had an introductory press conference yet for Trajan. Why is that? You could read in between the lines, or you could just follow the common sense, logical route, which would lead you to, they don't want to have an introductory press conference until they have their head coach. So to me, if they actually believed that Monty Williams was their coach, I feel like you would have had that introductory press conference by now. The only reason why you are holding off on a introductory press conference is because you don't feel like, there's two things. Either one, you don't feel like you are ready to answer questions about your head coach. You know that's going to be asked. And if you don't want him around, you don't want to have to answer the question of, we're not sure. You don't want to make that drama, bring that attention and extra, media coverage to that situation when you don't need to. That's one. And two, you don't want to have that introductory press conference until either you have fired Monty Williams and then you can say, okay, yeah, we're looking for a head coach. We're working diligently to A, B, C, D, etc. Go find this guy, blah, blah. Or be able to say, we have our coach right here. Maybe the introductory press conference happens when they find their head coach and they introduce all of them at the same time. Hey, this is what we're deciding to do. This is our guys. This is our vision now. This is a new era, etc., etc. The fact that it's been a few weeks without having an introductory press conference for Trajan tells me I don't feel like that Monty's returning. But again, it's not 100%. I just think this whole situation is weird because they didn't, again, like I said in the last episode too, if they were to just fire Troy and then bring back Monty, I feel like that kind of would be unfair and kind of scapegoating Troy. It wasn't just Troy this past year. Like, there's blood to go all around. There's some on Troy's hands, there's some on Monty's hands, and there's some obviously on Tom Gore's hands, except Tom Gore's is not going nowhere. He is the owner. Like, he is not going nowhere. But the two guys that actually have blood on their hands, and quite a bit of blood on their hands, like, washing your hands ain't doing nothing. Like, there's quite a bit of blood in your hands. Those two guys probably should go, and one of them is. So I feel like it would be unfair as well if you only got rid of one of those guys and brought the other one back. You're basically saying, oh, yeah, it was his fault. This guy avoids all blame. And that would just be incorrect and unfair, in my opinion. So, but overall, man, I just think this whole situation is weird, man. It's been a few weeks. It doesn't feel like, at least the public eye, I can't, speak to yet to anything that's happening behind the scenes, but publicly being made public to fans, like there's any, they're not leaning any other way, like one way or the other. It seems just as up in the air as it was a few weeks ago, at least publicly, like I said, to the fans. I just think it's weird. The draft is around the corner. You have the combine going on. You're scouting guys. You're trying to add a new vision to the team. You're trying to get everyone on your vision for this team. The free agency season less than a month. Like, you don't have all this time. And for it to seem that there's like no progress or idea really of what's going on, again, just publicly made to the fans, it's just a little weird. This is a weird situation. Also, if you go back, I mean, remember we had 2 weeks ago, like, what was it, 3 weeks ago, when Brian Windhorst was going on First Take like 3 times in 1 week saying that the Lakers might be monitoring, make sure you keep an eye on Monty Williams with the Pistons. They may be moving on. That's a name. That's a big time name the Lakers could be. Remember when Brian Windhorst was doing that day after day after day? He did that like 3 times on First Take in 1 week. Like, all of that, all the way to now, it's just this Pistons head coaching job in this future. It's just, I just think it's weird. It's a weird situation. I hope they wrap it up soon. Whether it's bring Monty back, which I think would be a mistake, but whether it's just bring him back or fire him and start your search, and again, like I said, the longer you wait to start your search, the less guys there would be available. So I don't know. They need to make the decision. Like, they need to come to the decision quickly, I think. But to me, I don't see why it needs to take so long. I mean, I feel like it's a simple, evaluation here, but it is what it is. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kooky Hill. When we come back, I've had a lot of you guys asking me, so I'm going to answer it again. If I had to take one player from the 2004 Detroit Pistons and put him on this team in this era, who would it be? I'll let you guys know when we come back. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count. The NBA Finals are right around the corner. Who you got? The Boston Celtics. You got the Dallas Mavericks. All those kind of things involving the NBA Finals. What you believe in, what you want to bet on, you have it over at FanDuel. Like I've told you guys many times a few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I tried out FanDuel, and I have not turned back since. It's been amazing, super easy to use, self-explanatory, and a lot of fun. So again, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count today. That's what FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So this is a question I have answered, I think, 3 times on the podcast each offseason, because this is a very good topic to have in the offseason. Like, it's a very popular topic amongst the community, the Pistons community, in the offseason when there's no Pistons basketball going on. And it's always about the 2004 Pistons, because that is obviously a very memorable team in this community for a lot of people around my age and a little older. So a lot of people asked me after the last episode when we talked about them, hey, if you had to take one player from that team, who would you put on this current team? And I think my answer is going to remain the same as it has the last few years. But if you haven't listened to any of the podcasts when I've answered that question before in the last few off seasons, I'll tell you the answer now, obviously. So I'm immediately, and look, this is no disrespect to any of these guys, because I think all of them are amazing. I think Ben and Chauncey are Hall of Famers. They are obviously Hall of Famers, but like I thought that beforehand. They're great. Like, no disrespect to any of them. But immediately I'm taking off Tayshaun, because Tayshaun, while he was good in what he did, when you have the other options on that team to add to the current team, like I just don't see why you would pass up on any of the other guys for Tayshaun. Like, not to say Tayshaun wasn't good, but if you pass up on all the other dudes for Tayshaun, I have to seriously question what you're doing. So that's one. Unless you have like 3 stars already, you're just looking for that guy to play defense on the wing. That's all you need. Like, okay, then maybe. But even then, I think there's one player on this list that you would still take over him. But either way, so I'm immediately crossing off Tayshaun. And another player that I'm immediately crossing off is Rip Hamilton. I'm crossing off Rip because with Rip, it just comes down to, I think there's 2 guys that just are simply better and would be better in this era. I don't know how effective Rip would be in 2024. If he was coming off screens and shooting threes and added some more threes to his shot diet, I think maybe things change differently. But still, even with that, that's not the main reason. There's 2 guys on this team that I think just are way better options. And then the other guy that I'm crossing off, this one's going to be the one that makes some people mad. I know it. It's Ben Wallace. Ben is a Hall of Famer. He is great. He's one of the best defensive players of all time. But I do have some questions about, in this era, would you be able to survive with someone who is that, let's just keep it a buck, not that good offensively? And I've had some people wonder this. I've seen some people wonder this. I didn't watch Ben like his whole career when I was younger. Obviously, I wasn't old enough to really comprehend basketball like that. But how would Ben do in the pick and roll? Like, can Ben, like, do you have to run drop coverage with Ben, or can he switch on the perimeter? Does he have quick enough feet? Is he able to stay out on the perimeter and guard guys? I would think so. But I've had some people tell me that if watching him back in the day, that wasn't something he was great at. But I would think so with how athletic he was. But again, I'm not sure. More so his offensive issues is what I would cross him off here for. So that leaves 2 guys, which I think are by far and away, I think these 2 guys are easily the guys that should be brought up instantly when talking about bringing them to today's NBA. And that's Chauncey Billups and that's Rasheed Wallace. I think those 2 guys are by far easily the guys you need to be talking about here. And my answer, I think, has been the same the last few years, though. Now that I think about it, I think maybe I may have flip-flopped one year, but I'm pretty sure I've stayed the same. My answer is Rasheed. Like Chauncey, I think before Cade, I think before Cade I may have said Chauncey, but after Cade, I don't know if I said Chauncey. But it should be Rasheed for this reason only. Or not this reason only, that's a lie. There's a few reasons. But the main reason is you have Cade, and I do think him and Chauncey would fit great together. However, I think having Rasheed play the 5 for this team, be a stretch big, a legitimate defender, and again, Rasheed is one of the most skilled players of that era of basketball. He just simply, he was one of the guys who sacrificed to win games. Rasheed is talented as hell. She can do post up, shoot from 3, post fadeaways, score around the basket, catch lobs, protect the rim, rebound the basketball, handle the ball, pass. Like, Rasheed is was skilled out of this world. I don't see how you could, if you put Rasheed in this era of basketball and you got him shooting 7 threes a game from the top of the key, like, and you have his ability to protect the rim on the other end of the floor, his physicality, his kind of mentality, his ability to punish mismatches. A lot of 5s who are able to, play in today's NBA, one of the main criticisms of them is that they can't take advantage of switches. Because a lot of times in the NBA now, the main defense is switched. A lot of teams just switch across the board. And the bigs nowadays, there's not many that can really make you pay. There's a few like Jokic, Embiid, but like there's not many. AD, there's not many that can make you pay for switching across the board. She would destroy teams for trying to switch against him. Like, and to have a stretch 5 on this team, imagine having Sheed and Asar next to each other. Like, that would be crazy. That would be like she is exactly the kind of 5 that we've been talking about on the podcast the last month. And I guarantee you, I think Sheed would be 10 times better in this era. Way, way better. I think he'd be used way more. I think his skills would pop even more now than they did back then. And again, I think Chauncey was the best player on that team. But for this team right now, I would rather have Rasheed than Chauncey. But those 2 guys are the ones I think you have to consider. The other 3, especially Ben, because he's a Hall of Famer. No disrespect to him at all. But the other 3, I don't think you should be considering for this team. Sheed and Chauncey are the main ones, and I'm going Sheed. I'll forever be in the camp that if Rasheed Wallace played in this era of basketball, he would dominate. Like, I fully believe that him and Chauncey would be dominant in today's NBA. I think they both would be all NBA players. I think Chauncey would be talked about one of the best players in the NBA. I think Rasheed would be talked about as one of the best players in the NBA. They would thrive in today's NBA. But give me the stretch 5 with the skills to play on defense, offensively, with the ball in his hands, passing. Give me that guy. And with his attitude, this team needs his attitude. I'm not going to lie to you. They need that. I know I'm one of the main ones that's always like, well, can we talk about playing basketball? Can we actually have good basketball players, not just attitude-y players? No, but if you're like Rasheed, you can ball, and you also bring an attitude to the team and set a tone. I mess with that. Bring Rasheed. I'd love Rasheed on this team. That's my pick. So let me know what you guys think, though. Was I wrong? Do you guys pick a different player? I think Rasheed would dominate, bro. Rasheed is one of those players that I think, sadly, now I don't say this like happily, but I think sadly may get forgotten throughout NBA history because he sacrificed. Because he sacrificed his numbers to win. But I am telling you, dude, that Sheed is one of the most talented players of that era. One of the most talented guys. He would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But that's all I got for you guys today, man. Appreciate you guys making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. If you're available on our podcast platforms, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Wait, I didn't even know this. She retired for 2 years, then came back to New York. I thought he went from Boston straight to New York. I don't remember him retiring for 2 years, then trying to make a comeback. I don't remember that. Anyways, going off on a tangent. All right, I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Stay safe, everybody.